What is up, everybody? I'm No Lux Given here with your afternoon snap, and every day I am breaking down my Galactus Destroyer deck with a focus on one card in particular, and today's particular card is going to be Cosmo. That's the focus of this video. Thought this was a fun game to kick things off with that showcases Cosmo quite well. We're going to lead off with a Wolverine into my opponent's Zabu, and we've got Sewer System, Washington, D.C., and that third location is a spicy one, Project Pegasus, and that will kind of flip the order of typical things here. Normally, you will go Cosmo, and then you'll play Destroyer on top of that Cosmo, and Cosmo will keep all of your other cards safe. You can also use Professor X or Armor to protect your other cards, though in this one, we're dropping that Destroyer first. So my opponent is going to hit us with a Rock Slide and a White Queen to steal our Hobgoblin. And then I'm going to use Destroyer to blow up Wolverine and an Armor to protect my Destroyer from potential future Shang-Chis. But the fact that my opponent stole my Hobgoblin has kind of got me thinking, well, I might want to catch that Hobgoblin with Cosmo. My opponent took it from me, and you know what? They can keep it. So I'm going to play Daredevil here on turn 4, so that way I know for sure where my opponent is going to throw that Hobgoblin. We'll have this Daredevil sight here on turn 5. I do think it was pretty likely that my opponent threw Hobgoblin into the Sewer System, but now we know for sure and we can catch that with Cosmo. But the cherry on top is that we get to play the rock that my opponent gave us into Washington, D.C. for 3 power for only 1 energy. So I'm going to snap here. I'm feeling pretty good about our chances. We definitely won Project Pegasus, and after this turn, we'll actually be winning in all 3 locations. So a pretty good chance here at taking the win. Cosmo is going to flip over. The rock will give us a little bit more power, like I said, and then the Hobgoblin can stay where it is. So we're only barely winning in the Sewer System, but my opponent will at least have to play something there to take it over, and I'm just going to play the Hobgoblin. I'm going to give them this other Hobgoblin because they like Hobgoblins so much, and we'll play that in Washington, D.C. Hopefully my opponent doesn't play 2 cards there, but they also have to try to win these other locations. I know they're not going to try to win Project Pegasus. It looks like they did leave us some room for Hobgoblin, and then they finish off the game with double Darkhawk, but that rock in Washington, D.C. was just enough to give us the victory. The other stuff you can do with Cosmo is pretty straightforward and well documented, and I would say the main cards in this deck that interact with Cosmo are going to be Destroyer and then also Daredevil, like we showed off in this one. Otherwise, you're just using Cosmo to disrupt whatever it is that your opponent is trying to do, and there's a lot of cool things. We're going to look at one more game in just a second. There's a lot of cool things that people are trying to do with on-reveal abilities, and Cosmo just shuts them all down. Pretty straightforward stuff. It can be important to have priority. That's also a nice thing, and because this deck often has priority in the sole Galactus location, it can be good to use Cosmo to just protect you from Shang-Chi's. I think we looked at that in yesterday's video as well, and kind of talked about that a little bit today, using Armor to protect the Destroyer from Shang-Chi. There is one other tricky play that you can make with this deck that's actually never fully come to fruition for me, but I wanted to talk about it before we get into our second game, just in case you decide to play this deck yourself and all of the stars align. What you do is you wave Galactus into Bar with No Name. Then you Cosmo, and then you Hobgoblin to win the only location with -3 power, winning you the game. Pretty silly one, but really, really funny if you're able to pull it off. For the most part though, Cosmo's just a tech card. You play it to stop those powerful on-reveal abilities in your opponent's deck, and it's so strong that we play it even though we're playing Galactus, which is probably the most powerful on-reveal ability in the game, and we're going to see here that my opponent is playing it too, despite also playing some really strong on-reveal abilities in their own deck. Because I haven't drawn any ramp, I'm probably not going to be using Galactus this game, so I'm just going to play Atuma into Lechugia. I do think that one of the strengths of Cosmo is it does kind of mask that you are a Galactus deck, though in this game we're just not really going to be a Galactus deck. One other really powerful on-reveal ability, one of the strongest cards in the game right now, is Shuri. And we see that my opponent is playing Shuri despite also playing Cosmo, so same kind of thing. And in this one, I think my opponent's Cosmo is also going to help us out here because they are going to drop a Red Skull, and then what we can do is we can play Professor X into that first location. That will mean that we win Lechugia, but it also means that all other locations this game are being disrupted by Cosmo, and that is one really cool synergy with the deck. Being able to lock down locations with Professor X just means you're more likely to make use out of Cosmo when your opponent is kind of restricted on space here. And once I realize that, I realize I can snap because my opponent isn't going to be able to use Arnim Zola or Taskmaster to copy all of those stats that they just got out of that Red Skull, which means Destroyer is going to be free to win in that sewer system and take the game in our favor. And there's not really anything that my opponent can do here. Once we Professor that first location, I think they were probably planning on using Taskmaster to win another location, but now they can't. So there you go. I think that was another great showing of Cosmo, even if we did have to use our opponent's Cosmo to help us here and get the win. And I'm pretty sure my opponent is gonna retreat pretty soon. Let's take a look, but that's gonna be it for me today, guys. So thank you very much for watching. New Marvel Snap videos every day. I'm gonna continue to break down this deck and focus on one card in each video. But for today, that's gonna be it for me. So thank you very much for watching. I'm No Lux Given. Peace. There we go. There's the retreat.